Well, good morning. Welcome to Grover Hill Zion United Methodist Church here at 204 South Harrison Street here in Grover Hill. We're glad you're viewing, and we hope this message will be helpful to you. And of course, you're always welcome to come and be with us and on Sunday mornings at 10:30 or any other time. We have activities happening here. I want to talk to you this morning about the message, or the message that is about the vision and having a vision and sharing that vision with others. And I'm using Joel chapter 2 and a lot from Ezra chapter 3 as well. And as we think about a vision and having a vision, this book, by the way, comes from a book by the name of, or by the author Phil Collins, called From Good to Great. Some of this comes from there, not much, but in the beginning, a few of them. And he tells us that the railroad passenger business all but disappeared in this country as they competed with the airline industry in the 50s and 60s due to the fact that they forgot that they were transportation companies that just happened to own trains. They could have just as easily become transportation companies that own both trains and planes. The steamship industry as well had to evaluate their industry. They waited 20 years to shift their focus from transportation of travelers to partying vacationers. It was a shift in the end product that saved the industry that had been in distress since the late 50s. Of course, that movie Titanic didn't help them out any either. In 1979, Mike Slaughter became the pastor of Ginghamsburg United Methodist Church, the largest church in West Ohio Conference, our conference. It was a very small congregation when he went to it. He got the people together, and he said that there were some hard knocks and the like, and a lot of resistance, but finally he got them to look at a different vision, to re-examine what they were doing, and they went from being just focused on the congregation and those attending to, they changed their focus to become a mission-based ministry. Today they have 5,000 members today. Every industry or organization for that matter, really needs to look at the product that it's offering from time to time. They need to take a look and make sure that needed changes in those products and delivery and product costs to provide needed and relevant services that will help in the mission of the building of the client base actually are put in place. It's very difficult to do this when things are growing and everything is fine and dandy and there's no problems. We get blinded and we think everything is okay. And we forget about some of the changes that need to happen down the road, because everything that clients want in the future isn't going to take place today, and we need to stay up with those things. When everything's going well, it's easy for the industry to get blinded to changes in clients and service needs and requirements and conditions. And when everything's going well, we say, why should we discuss that? We have the market on all of this. Why should we even think about doing anything different? We've had those discussions as well, and I'm sure you've had those discussions. By the way, when we're discussing products of the church, do you know what the product of the church is, by the way? What is the church to be about? The church is to be about making disciples for Jesus Christ. The church is to be about reaching the lost, to have an outreach in the community so people can have changed lives for the better. Well, it's not quite as busy now, we say, as it was 6 months ago. We didn't evaluate anything. We didn't look, what do we need to do to keep up with the times. And so when it's not quite as busy, it gives us a chance, doesn't it, to look at what we need to do to recruit other folks. What reaches other folks? To review our business, services, and practices and client cost. And look at if we are truly relevant or not. Or are we just keeping a buggy whip market where we hang on until we just fade away? The Israelites were in captivity in Babylon. Some 50 years earlier, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had conquered Jerusalem. And he destroyed the temple along with the city, just leaving it all in just nothing but a pile of rubble. It was a practice in that day to knock down a conquered people's temple, to knock down their city walls so that the people wouldn't have any hope of returning. You know, people without hope, it makes them easier to control, or at least that was the thinking in the day. Have you ever seen someone without hope? It's a pathetic sight, isn't it? Pathetic sight. But our God is a God of hope who restores our hope. And his hope, his home is not of this earth. And he gives us the hope that at some time in the future, when we depart this earth, that we'll be with him for eternity. You know, the people realized that they could never, ever restore the city or the temple by themselves, that they needed divine intervention to help them if it was ever going to be built. Before healing and restoration in our lives can ever take place, we first have to hear the cold, hard truth of our situation. We don't always want to hear that, do we? We close our eyes and shut our ears, and we just pretend like everything's okay. But the people realized everything wasn't okay, and they cried out to God, and God heard their cries, and he blessed the people as they left Babylon and to go back to Jerusalem and to rebuild the city and to rebuild the house of God. God blessed the people. That which seemed to be just an impossible dream became a reality as the temple rose up out of the ashes like a phoenix. You may remember from mythology, a phoenix was a mythological bird that attains new life by rising from the ashes of its predator. Thus, the Jerusalem and the temple rose up out of the ashes in a pile of rubble. That which was broken and destroyed was renewed and restored. That which looked to be dead was raised to new life. Something similar is happening in Van Wert right now. If you've been over there recently, you've seen so many of those buildings. I don't know what the foundation bought, 50 or 60 buildings. They bought a lot of them. Many of those buildings go clear back to the Civil War and before. A lot of them need a great deal of care and restoration. The mortar's all loose and the bricks and like in many of those buildings. But those buildings are being rejuvenated. And people are saying, why do that? Why do that? Well, somebody had a vision, and somebody can see something that you and I can't see. Somebody has faith enough to believe that whatever they're doing is going to work. It's going to be okay. Well, in Ezra's day, the people worked on the building of the house of God with their whole hearts. And it was a beautiful sight to behold. The temple, we're told, could be seen from miles away with the golden dome just glowing in the sun. It could be seen from the mountaintops. As the people beheld the temple from the mountaintops, they saw that the God of Israel was an awesome God, worthy of praise. The people, even though they had been captives in a foreign land and their temple had been destroyed, never stopped dreaming of the day when God would restore them to their glory and take away their shame. It brought shame upon the people for their God's house to be in such a horrid condition. They prayed and ate the Passover meal, and they began working on the temple. And if you read that part, notice that they not only prayed to God, but then they took action. They took action as well. Prayer alone will not build a temple or grow a church. Of course, prayer is absolutely essential in the ministry of the church. A prayerless ministry is a powerless ministry. But there is a time to take action when the praying's done. Joshua kept praying to God, down on his knees, falling on his face, about a mistake he'd made. He felt so bad about it. He was ashamed. And he kept praying to God. He prayed so long that God finally said to him, and you can read that in Joshua 7, chapter 7, by the way, that God finally said to him, Joshua, stop praying about your failure. Get up and correct the cause of it. Take that action that is necessary to make things right. There is a time to pray, but there's also a time to act. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, Solomon writes that there's a season for everything. There's a time to build and a time to throw away. There's a time to get rid of the old and accept the new. A time for a change and a time to go in a different direction. It's hard, isn't it, sometimes to embrace the new. To embrace the new. It's hard for some folks that have an old landline at home to even use a cell phone. You know, people just can't. And I understand that. You know, there are things that I'm reluctant to embrace too. Just got a new computer. I'm so used to having a DVD, CD player in computers, but mine is so old now. It's, you know, there's so much new materials out there that it kind of slows the old computer down. So I wanted a CD player. You know what? They don't put the DVD, CD players in these new computers. They don't put them in there. I thought, how am I going to work that? Well, there's a way. You just have to discover there's another way to do that. There's a time to get rid of the old and a time to embrace the new. My aunt and uncle lived in the house that I lived in now, my mom's brother and his wife. They actually were married and remodeled that house when they moved in there in 1939. Then in 1969, they put a new kitchen in. And when I went in there in 92, for a long time, I was thinking about, it'd be nice to have a changed kitchen. I don't like this kitchen. Everything was just dark brown. I didn't like that, you know. I kept saying, I'm going to change that, I'm going to change that. And I thought, nah, that's the way they had it. I'll just leave it like that. Finally, I made the decision to change it. You know, and I'm glad I did. Because not only did they change the color of it and some of the cabinets that were in there and the appliances and stuff, but the lighting fixtures and the receptacles, they just changed it all. I finally made the decision to change, and boy, am I glad I did. Everything now is so much easier to use. And over the years, I've made other changes to the place as well, where in my opinion, it makes it better, makes it easier to use. So much so that my aunt and uncle, if they were able to see the house today, they wouldn't recognize it today. There have just been so many changes made to it. And seeing the transformation that has taken place in the kitchen as well as the other areas, it's been worth it all to have made the changes. You know, that is what happens in our lives when we resist change, even though God tells us that we have to change to become new creations. Yet when we make the change and we become a new creation, in order to glorify God as well, we make other changes in our lives. We find that the change has been worth it all. Worth it all. Though God tells us that we have to change to become new creations, it is worth it all, isn't it, when we make that change? As Ezra laid the foundations of the temple, some of the older folks who remembered the first temple began weeping when they saw the restoration begin taking place, while others rejoiced at seeing their dream begin to come true. Still, there were enemies. There were enemies who tried to stop the work on it. You know, it's the way, too. There are enemies when you try to enact your vision. There'll be enemies that try to stop you, try to slow you down, try to frustrate you and irritate you. That's the way it is. But Ezra answered them, listen, as much as you want to frustrate our work, you will not stop us. You have no part of this. We are building this house for the Lord our God. You have no part of it. You know, some folks never want to change, but they were content to leave everything just in a big pile of rubble. Isn't that something? And it wasn't of any good to anybody. And because their God was housed there, it brought shame upon the people. And God's people just wouldn't have any of that. They refused to leave it lay in a pile of rubble. They went to work building the house of God that would be no shabby building, but a wonder to behold. Nehemiah in Nehemiah chapter 17, who also was with Ezra working on building the walls around the city and the gates as well, said to the people, see, we're in trouble. The walls and the gates have been burned and knocked down. Let us rebuild them so that we will no longer be in disgrace. So they rebuilt the walls to the city and hung the gates. The temple in the city rose up out of the ashes because the people of God prayed and God gave them a vision of restoration. And the people worked with all of their hearts to build the house of God. We must be aware that when people praise the Apostle Paul as well for the work that Paul had done, Paul reminded them, listen, I'm nothing, Apollos is nothing, God is everything. He said, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but it was God that made it grow. It was God that made it grow. And so if God has given you a vision, if God has given you a dream, to reach the lost for missions, whatever it may be, don't be afraid to act upon it. God will give you the wisdom. God will give you He will enable you to do whatever it is He has given you the vision for. Okay? And if you have a vision or a dream for the church, don't keep it to yourself. That does no one any good. Share it with someone else. Well, God bless you and have just a great, great week. And enjoy this continued beautiful weather. And of course, the Flat Rock Festival is going on. Maybe you're going to slip over there and enjoy the time over there as well. Have a great week.